So, you're interested in playing Dark Souls, but you don't know where to start. Perhaps you already played Elden Ring, and you want to dive deeper into the older games. Or, you're new to the series and want to start with a franchise that is so beloved by many. Well, I made this video in order to help you out, as I played almost every single Soulsborne game, excluding Demon Souls, as I do not own a PS3 at the moment and I want to play the original game before I play the PS5 remake. In this video, we will be discussing all three games, their strengths and weaknesses, and if they're the best game for you to start with. Some will say that you should play them in order, but that isn't really true. Even though the whole series is connected, they all have their own story, and you won't be missing out if you start with Dark Souls 1, then Dark Souls 3, and finally Dark Souls 2. What matters in the end is that you have fun, and if one game in particular catches your eye, then by all means, give it a try. Another question you might have is if you can skip one particular game. And yes, you can. But if you do enjoy one game, then you will most likely enjoy the other two. What I like about this series is that each game has its own flavor that makes it unique. But at the end of the day, they're all still Dark Souls, and it really makes me appreciate them all as a whole. If you're new to the series, then welcome. My name is Soul Drifter, and I'm a big fan of the Souls-like genre. Before I begin, let me just clarify that yes, Dark Souls are challenging games. They're not impossible to beat, but they will take time to get used to. It is common for many people in the community to say that your first Souls-like game is always the hardest one. So don't feel bad if you're struggling at first, as this is to be expected. Remember that you're not alone and that there are many out there cheering you on as you explore the wonderful world of Dark Souls. So let's get started, shall we? Dark Souls 1 came out in 2011. It was created by the mastermind Hidetaka Miyazaki and developed by From Software. It is the spiritual successor of Demon Souls that came out exclusively on the PS3 back in 2009. The story begins in the Age of Ancients, where there was only fog and dragons, and the world wasn't formed. But then fire came into existence, and four gods stumbled into what is known as the Great Soul. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, the Witch of Isolate and her Daughters of Chaos, Nito, the First of the Dead, and the Furtive Pygmy, so easily forgotten. Gwyn, the witches, and Nito united against the dragons, and with the help of a dragon known as Seat the Scaleless, who betrayed its own kind, they were all able to start a new age, the Age of Fire. This age lasted for thousands of years until the fire began to fade. Gwyn decided to sacrifice himself to prolong the flame, and since he carried a great soul, it was considered good enough to rekindle the flame. But now the fire is fading once again. The world is in chaos, and our character, branded with the curse of the undead, is freed from their cell, and learns about a prophecy that will reveal their fate after they ring the bell of awakening. So that's the rundown of the story. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but I think the setting is intriguing enough. Now when it comes to exploration, the game is considered by many as a Metroidvania. As soon as you leave the tutorial, you're pretty much allowed to go anywhere you want. There's no hand-holding in this game, and this can be detrimental for some, as you can end up in places you're not supposed to be yet. Another thing I want to add is that during the first half of the game, you don't have the ability to fast travel, which means that you have to travel by foot. All this may sound like bad level design, but I think it's the game's strongest feature, as you really get to familiarize yourself with the world, and by the end of the game, you have become an expert on traversing it, even once you unlock fast travel. There really isn't anything like it, and it makes Dark Souls 1 stand out compared to the rest of its brethren. The gameplay is known as slow and methodical. You have your main weapon on your right hand, a shield on your left, and basic movement. You're allowed to dodge in any direction, unless you target lock on an enemy, which in that case you can only dodge in 4 directions. As long as you have the stamina, you can use all these tools at your disposal, but if you run out, then your options are pretty limited, and this can put you in a dangerous situation. Casters or magic users can use spells or miracles to attack from a safe distance. They can also use other utility spells that can help them on their journey. You can cast all these spells as long as you meet the stat requirements and have them equipped. Also, keep in mind that these spells are limited, and if you run out, then you won't be able to use them until you rest at a bonfire. Oh? What is a bonfire, you say? Well, think of it as a safe checkpoint where you can rest, level up, and do other things. Do keep in mind that enemies will respawn if you rest at a bonfire. Now, when it comes to difficulty, Dark Souls 1 can be pretty challenging for beginners to go in blind. Aside from the world being open in nature, there's also mechanics that the game won't tell you about that can affect your gameplay. Don't feel bad for looking up beginner's guide videos on YouTube, as this is normal and even encouraged by the community. And don't worry, most of these videos won't spoil the game for you. It is also okay to go in blind. My only recommendation is to take your time and pay attention to what you find while you play. The game won't hide mechanics from you, but it wants you to seek them yourself. Remember to persevere and to take breaks if the game becomes too much for you. Dark Souls 2 came out in 2014. It was initially directed by Tomohiro Shibuya, but halfway through the game's development, Yui Tanimura took over the role as director. Miyazaki acted as a supervisor, as he was already occupied with directing Bloodborne at the time. This game has gotten a bit of a bad reputation by many. It is considered as the black sheep of the franchise, and you will hear most people say that it is okay to skip this game entirely. Let me just say that most of the critiques this game gets are a bit overblown, and that it is a good game worth your time. Now let's discuss story. This game focuses more on the curse of the undead, and what it means to go hollow. What does going hollow mean? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Well, to put it simply, hollowing is something that was already said in Dark Souls 1. It's basically the end result of the curse of being undead. You see, an undead will revive each time they die, but they will lose bits of themselves with each revival until they completely lose themselves and become mindless beings that only desire to consume the souls of others. Hollowing can also happen when someone loses their motivation to go on. For example, our character will never go hollow unless the player decides to quit the game and never come back. This is why many fans like to say the famous phrase, "Don't you dare go hollow." Now, this game takes place many years after Dark Souls 1. The fire is once again fading, and we play as a character who has the curse of the undead. We see them slowly losing themselves until they hear a place called Drangleic. Apparently, many undead go to this place, as it contains a vast amount of souls, and it may have the cure for the curse that we carry. We found this old shack house, with a group of old firekeepers inside, that tell us that many like us have come before, and they all have ended up going hollow. They think we will be no different, and they mock our predicament. They ask for our name, and once we give them one, they will give us an item called the Human Effigy. This item is what allows our character to remember a bit about themselves, and this is when we can create our character, choose our class, and what gift we want. Once we're done, we're told to go forward and see if we can find a cure for our curse, and this is where the game begins. The exploration in this game is not as open as Dark Souls 1, but you still have the liberty to go to many different places at the beginning. One thing you will learn right away is that you have the ability to fast travel from the get-go. Considering that this game is much bigger and longer than the first one, then it only makes sense that they gave you this ability early on. Now, when it comes to combat, this game may feel a bit slower and clunkier than the previous one, but once you get used to it, I think you will begin to enjoy it. Unlike Dark Souls 1, you can dodge in any direction, even if you're target locking on an enemy. But one thing you may notice is that the dodging feels a bit off. Let me explain. Dark Souls 2 is a bit more experimental compared to the other two games, and you will see some mechanics in 2 that they never brought back in future games. One of those is the stat known as adaptability. This stat governs the speed of your actions, like for example, opening doors, drinking your Estus flask, picking up items, and also your agility. Agility is what gives you the iframes to your dodge. The more agility you have, the more iframes you get while dodging. Many will point to this being a dumb mechanic that only makes you waste points on a useless stat. And in a way, yeah, I kinda see what they mean. But to be fair, it's not as bad as people make it sound. If you're playing Scholar of the First Sin Edition, the game gives you plenty of souls to level up, and you don't need to invest that much on adaptability to get a decent dodge. And if you're playing as a caster, then the stat attunement, which governs how many spells you can use, can also give you some points in agility. One thing I really like about Dark Souls 2 is the build creation. Like I mentioned before, this game is experimental, and the devs want you to experiment with your build as much as you like. For example, once you find the Smithy McDuff, he will let you infuse any weapon to any element or status available. And when I mean any weapon, I mean every weapon. Another cool feature is that you can reallocate your stats as you see fit. Now, you need an item for this, and it is pretty rare to find, but once you get your hands on one, then you can respec your build to try something new. Last thing I want to mention is the item called Bonfire Aesthetic. Each game has a New Game Plus feature, but what makes Dark Souls 2 unique is that you can ascend an area that you already cleared with the Bonfire Aesthetic. This will even let you bring back bosses you have already defeated in that area. This is an underrated feature, and it baffles me that they never brought it back on the later games. Let's talk about difficulty. Now, when it comes to Dark Souls 2, I like to see each area as a puzzle that you have to solve in order to have an easier time traversing it. Now, most people will say that the game has horrible areas with tons of enemies that will chase you to the ends of the earth. But let me just say that if you ignore every single enemy and just head straight to the boss, then yes, you will have a bad time. Again, you want to take your time and analyze your surroundings. If you do this, then you'll realize that most areas are pretty simple to beat, once you understand what the game is showing you. For example, a lot of enemies are scared of fire, and if you bring a torch with you, no matter how many enemies are out there, they won't attack you because they are afraid of the fire. So keep this in mind when you're playing, and don't be afraid to ask help if you're stuck. This game gives you plenty of NPC summons for a reason. Use them. In conclusion, this game is great, and you should definitely give it a try. Dark Souls 3 came out in 2016. Miyazaki came back as director after being done with Bloodborne. It is the last game in the Dark Souls franchise. I have a bit of a history with this game, as it was the first Dark Souls game I've ever played, so you could say that I'm a bit nostalgic towards it. As a matter of fact, I naively thought that I wouldn't like the older entries because they weren't as fast and modern like Dark Souls 3. And yeah, that was very dumb of me to think that way. Dark Souls 3 is a really good game, and many consider it the best in the franchise. But Dark Souls 1 and 2 are just as good, even if they are a bit slower in their gameplay. I would recommend people new to the series to play this first if they already played Elden Ring or Night Ring, since they are quite similar in terms of gameplay. Anyway, let us briefly discuss the story. The world has become twisted and decayed, as the fire has been rekindled way too many times to count. Now this time, the current lord set to rekindle the flame refuses to take action. In a desperate attempt, the fire brings back lords who have previously kindled the flame, but seeing the current state of the world, these lords also refuse to do anything about it. In a last-ditch effort, the fire brings back people who previously failed to link the flame. These beings are known as the Unkindled Ones, and we play as one of them. Our goal is simple. We have to find these lords who refuse to rekindle the flame, and bring back their ashes to their thrones as substitutes. This will be considered good enough for the fire to keep going for a bit longer. This game talks about how things eventually need to end. The fire is not everlasting, and being rekindled too many times has only done more harm to the world than actual good. At the end of the day, the choice is ours, if you want to continue the cycle, or let things end for good. Now, when it comes to exploration, this game is the most linear in the series. There are some off paths you can take, but once you finish the tutorial and reach the Firelink Shrine, there's only one area available at the start. People often complain about this and compare it to the interconnected world of Dark Souls 1. Honestly, it's up to you if it bothers you or not. Personally, I don't really mind it that much. I like the world in Dark Souls 3. I think with how much experience the devs have gotten over the years, it reflects on the level of detail that you get to see in the areas that you visit on your journey. Compared to the last two games, this one takes a much more aggressive approach, very similar to Bloodborne. You don't need to rely on your shield as much, as your movement is just as good for defensive and offensive plays. One thing I did not talk about from the last two games are the bosses, as most of them are pretty basic in terms of their attack patterns, excluding the DLC bosses of course. They also had more experimental bosses, where the way to take them down was more of a puzzle than an actual fight. In Dark Souls 3, there's only a few puzzle-like bosses, while the rest of them are pretty fun to fight. You would notice this right away with the tutorial boss, as he is no pushover, and it can be a challenging fight for beginners. Same with Dark Souls 2, you get the chance to reallocate your stats, so if you feel like your build isn't really working for you, then as soon as you reach the Cathedral of the Deep, which is like the fort area in the game, then you can talk to a certain NPC and respect your build for a few times. Let me just say, this game can be hard. Some of the bosses can be tough fights, and the enemies are more aggressive and much faster than the previous games. You will die a lot, but don't give up. If you do get stuck at a boss or an area, you can go somewhere else. Even though this game is linear, there are a few different paths you can take, so keep this in mind. Remember, patience, observation, and using the tools available to you will make your playthrough much easier. So now the question is, which game should you start first? Well, if you prefer to play a game similar to a Metroidvania, with good world exploration, slow and methodical combat, then Dark Souls 1 is for you. This game is great, and I can't recommend it enough. There's something magical about it. The many different approaches you can take on a playthrough just makes it more replayable than the other two, in my opinion. If you want a game that is a bit more experimental in its gameplay, interesting build variety, and a unique New Game Plus mechanic, then Dark Souls 2 is a good game to start with. Remember that it is the longest game in the series, and sometimes it can feel like it's dragging a bit, but the story is solid, and it has one of the most underappreciated characters ever. And if you want to learn who I'm talking about, then well, you gotta play the game to find out. If what you're looking for is a game with good action and top tier boss design, then Dark Souls 3 is the game for you. Having a linear level design doesn't mean it's a bad level design. Don't let people fool you. If the journey is enjoyable and challenging, then it is worth it. In conclusion, all three games are great. As a matter of fact, play all of them. Believe me, you won't regret it. The order doesn't really matter. This isn't a JRPG. If you have a slight interest in a game, don't think you need to play the one that came before in order to truly get the best experience. What matters is that you get to have fun. That's what games are for at the end of the day. And Dark Souls are fun games. Thank you so much for watching.